let's talk about the hero's journey. And it doesn't matter if it's ancient, if it's modern, and we all live through this, okay? So we have three acts, There's the departure, which is separation, initiation, and return. The journey follows 12 key stages arranged in a circular path. And we're going to be using Star Wars to point us out in this direction, right? So we begin in the ordinary world. Before the adventure begins, we see the hero in their normal life, unaware of the journey ahead. The example, or the classic example, is Luke Skywalker on Tatooine, living as a farm boy. And then we have the call to adventure, a challenge, a threat, or opportunity disrupts the hero's ordinary life. Example, Obi-Wan tells Luke about the Force and asks him to join the rebellion. There's something that's a message before there. There's something that kind of gets the message out, or that you can get a hint of what's going to happen. And I love the scene. It's when Luke, before the end of that day, when they get the droids, and he looks on the to the horizon, and his uncle is saying, you're gonna have to stay for another season and help me with a farm before you can go and be a pilot. And he looks to the horizon, and you see the two suns setting, and that's when we hear Luke's theme. And in the end, Skywalker, you're always looking at the distance. That's what we can hear. That's the call to adventure is almost there. And what happens afterwards? That's the refusal to the call. We always refuse the call. The hero hesitates, doubts themselves, or rejects the call out of fear or obligation. Am I worthy? Is this really for me? The example is Luke initially refuses to leave Tatooine, saying he has responsibilities at home. But then we meet the mentor, a wise figure. A mentor appears to guide, train, or inspire the hero. So here we see Obi-Wan Kenobi giving Luke his father's lightsaber and teaching him about the Force. I mean, that's where we start to see that transformation. And then we get to the crossing of the threshold. And it's the end of Act 1 of departure. The hero fully commits to the adventure, leaving their familiar world behind. The example is Luke leaves Tatooine with Han Solo and enters the world of the rebellion. Then we move into test, allies, and enemies. This is the start of Act 2, the initiation. The hero faces obstacles, makes allies, and encounters enemies, preparing for the main challenge. So this is just like preparing. This is the training. And the example is Luke, Han, and Leia escape the Death Star, but Obi-Wan is killed, and there's a loss in this process. Suddenly you have this mentor, and you feel real comfortable, and you kind of go forward because you have this mentor that kind of shows you the way, and suddenly the mentor goes away. And you're thrown into this situation. You have to redo not redo, but you have to see who's there now. And now who's left with Luke? His buddy, maybe an atheist, maybe somebody that does not believe in the Force, which is Han. And then you have the princess, and he has to do with that. And of course, the two droids, which are very important. Then we have the approach to the inmost cave. And this is sort of what we're talking about, the dark force. The hero reaches a critical place, often a literal or figurative cave, where they prepare for the ultimate ordeal. The example is the Rebel Alliance plans the attack on the Death Star. The ordeal, the supreme challenge. The hero faces their greatest fear or crisis, often experiencing a symbolic death and rebirth. The example is Luke joins the final battle against the Empire, risking everything. And imagine this, before that time, Luke was a nobody. Suddenly there's the princess that was saved and comes along with this, this contrabandist, this pirate, and this farm boy. And suddenly they give this farm boy a ship, nobody knowing what's going to happen. And then the reward, which is seizing the sword. An overcoming ordeal, the hero gains a reward, wisdom or power that will help them in their journey. The example is Luke successfully destroys the Death Star. And we can hear throughout this ordeal the voice of Obi-Wan always guiding him, always showing this is the way. And then once he destroys the Death Star, he gets this reward. We get the road back, which is the start of Act 3, the return. Once we get to the climax, to the pinnacle, now it's the resolution. And that's how we see in stories as well. We get going to the third act, and we're resolving this. We got the challenge, we got the wisdom, we got the whatever it is that is going to bring the return and bring conclusion to that situation. So the sort of act turn is the hero begins the journey home, but there still may be obstacle. And the example is the Empire retaliates, setting the stage for future challenges. And I think that here is a very crucial step for anybody that gains wisdom. How are you going to use that wisdom? Are you going to use it for good? Are you going to use it for evil? Are you going to be exploiting people? Or are you going to be sharing with people? And this is important because once somebody gets to power, and if you do not dominate your ego and really put your ego aside, you can be drunk on power, and that can be worse than the bad guy. It's always in stories that we see that the hero becomes a worse bad guy than the worst guy. Then we get the resurrection. A final test pushes the hero to fully transform, proving that they have changed. Example: in Return of the Jedi, Luke faces Vader and the Emperor, fully embracing his role as a Jedi. And not only that, we see in the latter saga of Star Wars that he even fails as a master. He fails Kylo Ren, in that time Ben Solo, thinking that he's going to be bad, he's going to turn evil, and trying to, take that decision for him, and causing all that happened, which is turning him to the dark side and him becoming Kylo Ren. So in a way, Luke did fail as a master. And we see that, probably when we were young, we didn't realize that, but we realized it afterwards that he did fail. And then we have the return to the elixir. The hero returns home bringing newfound wisdom, strength, or an actual reward to share. The example is Luke restores peace to the galaxy and carries on the Jedi legacy. But if we look at the main story, the story of Luke, we can say that that has the return to the elixir. So this is the hero's journey, and I want to just add this to the myth as foundation for personal religion. Let me just read this so we can but I wanted to add this to this breakdown of the hero's quest. All right, myth as foundations of personal religion. Myth serves as the deep foundation upon which personal religion is built, offering individuals a narrative framework to interpret their lives and experiences. Myths are not merely ancient stories about gods or heroes. They are sacred tales that reflect and reinforce the community's worldview, providing explanations for existence, morality, and the mysteries of life. Through myth, individuals find models of behavior, sources of inspiration, and sense of belonging to something greater than themselves. The archetypal patterns and symbols within myths become internalized, shaping how a person perceives right and wrong, purpose, and destiny. As these myths are embraced and personalized, they give rise to what can be called personal religion, a lived internalized faith that draws on the values, metaphors, and rituals of myth. This process is evident across cultures and history. Myths justify rituals, explain the origins of sacred practices, and offer a fixed model for moral and religious behavior. For example, the myth of a hero's journey or a divine creation story is not just a tale of to be recited, but a map for an individual's spiritual growth and struggle. A lot of scholars have noticed that myth is not an obstacle to religion, but it's an essential foundation, providing the existential meaning and emotional resonance that personal religion requires. This intimate relationship between myth and personal religion means that even in a modern secular age, the values and symbols of ancient myths continue to shape individual belief systems where through traditional religious practice or more individualized spiritual paths, people seek guidance, comfort, and identity in the timeless patterns of myth. And this is important. I'm going to turn this to you guys. And this is how I treat my kids. I realize that, my kids, when they're 5, when they're 6, even 10, almost to when, culture see that they come of age, which is 13, 15 years of age, you can't really talk to them about God. I mean, it's a very high concept, and it's really, not practical for them, to try to explain God to them. But if you tell them these stories, if you tell them the stories of heroes, if you tell them the stories of fairy tales, about all these magical creatures and magical beings that are around us, we fill their minds with all these archetypes and all these possibilities and all these mythical stories that really create their foundations for spirituality and therefore for their personal relationship with God. And I think that's basic and fundamental, that we share with our children these stories, and that we never in an instant think that this is not transcending in their minds. And I open this to you guys. Anybody that wants to share?
I'll go ahead and share. I feel like that really arouses their curiosity, like you're saying. It's just all those myths and stories and legends arouses their curiosity, and hopefully they will seek answers and they will seek solutions, and something will stick with them, and they'll ask questions to a trusted adult like their parent or a teacher. So absolutely, yeah, it's hard to evoke spirituality in children, but to get their curiosity going is so important.
And how do you do it, Carrie? Because especially, I mean, you tailor your stories to young children. I mean, how can you bring, and especially, stories, and we were talking about this the other day. How can you tell a child about, the crucifixion and these dark forces or these dark times? How can you explain that to them?
Well, I think you need characters to help with that, to interest them. You need a character they can relate to, something they think is charming and cute, or even if it's an evil, So my protagonist is a butterfly, is a pink fantasy butterfly, but she has a friend that she can talk to. So I think by bringing these legends and these heroes and these superheroes, that's why the superheroes are so important and so popular rather in films and such. But that helps to get them thinking and arouse their curiosity and ask questions.
No, thank you so much for that. There was so much wonderful things, and I really agree with, I could really hear what Carrie was saying. I think one thing that, and you touched on this, Santiago. I think that's one thing that's really interesting in relation to children. I have children as well. Is that the hero's journey is like often, I think misunderstood as like a straight climb, right? Like you're just gonna leave and you're gonna conquer everything and you're gonna come back a champion and that's it, right? But that's not what it is. It's a circle, as you said. I love that it begins with leaving what and it actually ends with bringing something back. And I think often that can be in relation to what we're talking about, a deeper understanding of yourself. So, I think for children, I mean, everyone, but I think for children, that circular path is really vital. It teaches you that like uncertainty is not failure, that being afraid or making mistakes or when you're feeling lost, that's not the end, it's actually the middle, right? And that
Yeah.
the darkest part of the story usually comes right before the transformation, right? And that's really powerful because it gives them a framework for their own struggles, that they're going to have. And I think, said this before, but I just think it continues to say that you are in the story. You're not outside of it. You are becoming someone, right? Even when it feels like you might be breaking or things aren't going. So because I think perfection is something that is very harmful to us all, and it's not achievable. And this somehow is attainable, and because it's not even attainable, it's just something that you can do. It's a path you can go on. It's a journey that everybody can take, right? It's not like the ticket isn't too expensive, right?
Exactly. Yeah, and I think yeah, I see it in a way that yeah, you can always pay the ticket. I mean, some tickets, I mean, some are you can pay a cheap ticket. I mean, and then some are, but you have to be willing to pay that price. But you're always going to have to that money, and
Uh-huh.
maybe that's the path. You have to accrue that money in order to pay that ticket. I don't know because you can overcome everything, and I think that's what you mean. It's not price to the ticket because anything is attainable. I think that's the word that you say. Everything is attainable if you put yourself to it. And I think if you have faith, faith plays a lot here. When you go into that cave and you say, okay, this is what I put in here and what I put into the soil. So I'm hoping, and that's the way I see it. It's like when you codify a seed, you know that this seed is going to bring this type of tree or this type of flower.
Right.
Well, what are you putting? What are you sowing into the seed, into the soil?
Right.
What is your intention? What is your attitude? And if you know that it's true, if at least sincere, you know that something good is going to come out of it. But if you know that you're you're just sowing evil or you're just sowing
Hmm.
something bad, a bad tree is going to come out of that.
Exactly. And and it's like you made me think of this, but the hero doesn't just save themselves, right? It's because of this new way that you come back of looking, you actually end up, whether you want to or not, you end up bringing healing to the world, that you actually left behind, which I think
Awesome.
is, as profound as it gets.
Thank you, Reza. That's beautiful what you just said.
I would like to say just real quickly in response to what Risa said is telling stories are memorable more than even personal teaching or whatever for the children and the next generation. I think it's so important to pass on the ideals to the next generations through stories because we have a way of putting truth into the stories that is memorable, but are also the children can relate to how to handle certain situations, how to overcome fear and be transformed. And so I put into the tutor, how do we face greatest fear or challenge or crisis? And it said, facing our greatest fears, crises, or challenges is one of the most profound tests of the human spirit. And it is in these moments that we are often called to grow in ways we could not have imagined. At the heart of the process is the recognition that fear and adversity, while deeply unsettling, are also opportunities for transformation. They invite us to confront the limitations of our understanding, to deepen our trust in the divine, and to discover the strength and resilience that lie within us. And it goes on to talk about how to find the stillness within from the divine, and then to not avoid or deny when there's a problem, but to have courage. And it doesn't mean the absence of fear, it means acting in spite of it.
In spite.
God and the higher power guiding us through the storm. But that was really beautiful what it came up with.
Beautiful. It's acting in spite of the fear, not avoiding the fear. Awesome.
The idea of myth is extraordinary for me. I remember being in a philosophy class at USC and learning about oral tradition, and that the myths were spread by the poets, and that was all in memory, that they could memorize the Iliad and the Odyssey through the rhythm of their poetry, because there was no writing. And each step, and that was storytelling then. And then storytelling evolved into the printed word. And in a great explosion, the Renaissance occurred. And then storytelling, telling the same stories, the hero's journey, because that's our journey. It's irrevocable. This is our journey because the world is a scary place. And we have to confront the fear. We have no choice as human beings from those early times to the present. And now we've moved on beyond the printed word into the visual cinematic communication that's spread through the instantaneous, near instantaneous digital reality that we live in, cyber reality that it pervades us, this magical world that's coming to us through frequency exchanges that I cannot explain and couldn't explain it when it was a cathode ray tube with a rabbit ear antenna. It's unbelievable. It turns into an image with sound, and we look at it and mesmerize, magnetize, provided with a new reality, a new dream reality, a new pattern. So we're all living the hero's journey, and to share the hero's journey in a way that others can grow from it is, I think, an extraordinary opportunity and gift and purpose, and gives me meaning just to try and figure out how to connect with that other person and share the accrued wisdom that one gets after failing many times, and understanding that you rise above it, you learn from it, you grow a new aspect of your soul, and in effect you connect with your own higher self, this divine self that we are, that we have access to, and that is the real journey. And the ultimate hero's journey to me, of course, well, it started with Milarepa. I love that story. If any of you know the Milarepa story, where that hero's journey is, he just wanted to be a good boy, and his mother was pissed off because his father died, and they were wealthy. The Milarepa family was very wealthy, but then when his father died, the uncle and aunt came in and took the estate and enslaved he and his mother. His mother said, "You got to go learn how to deal with this," and he learned black magic. And then he came back and he killed them by creating a sonic explosion in the temple that reverberated not the temple, but the house, and it collapsed this stone house on the relatives. And of course, he turned into a demon. He had to deal with that, and he had to go on and learn how to deal with it. And he went through a lot of torturous searching, and he found Marpa the translator, and Marpa said, "No, I'm not going to take you on as a student to transmute your evil." And although Marpa then had him build all these stone houses, and Marpa's wife decided she couldn't put up with him banging on the door of Milarepa all the time, trying to get Marpa to teach him how to transmute his black magic And so she forced Marpa to train him. And so Milarepa learns the mantra, goes off into the Himalayas, sits in a cave for a decade drinking nettle tea and just aligning himself with the deity of the universe. And in doing that, with each breath, he transmuted the evil, and he goes outside and he levitates and flies over his community and freaks out everybody. There, now he's the green demon. Milarepa, just sitting there, gathered all of these people around him. They came up to see who this man is now. And just his presence was enough to transform them, heal them. And he just wrote poetry until eventually one of the relatives, a son of the dead uncle, came and poisoned Milarepa. And Milarepa took the poison, thanked him, and then he just lifted off and ascended. That was my first, wow, that's a hero I would like to emulate. That goes further. Then we look at Jesus as and to me, the ultimate hero's journey.
Of course.
The most extraordinary. And Jesus is still affecting us, and he's maligned and he's revered and he's dogmatically used as almost a weapon on people. There's so many versions of Jesus, yet the essence of Jesus' story is the ultimate hero's journey. That's what gives me faith and understanding that I can move through life. Yeah, I was born Christian, but I didn't like church. And I realized after my trials and tribulations, there was a real North Star there. And I appreciate that there's so much great revelatory information that comes through resonating with the hero's journey on that level.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's our journey. Hero's journey is everybody's journey. And like you said, it's really the biggest one is Jesus, and we can all emulate that life, not only the divine, but the human. I think that the human Jesus is the most important, which we will be learning a lot in this podcast. Our time has come to an end. It's been really, really, really rewarding having these conversations, having this topic, which I think is fundamental to humanity, the mythical story and mythical archetypes, and how we shape our reality and how we view the world and how we make it give meaning and eventually, establish that personal relationship with God. We basically ignite that divine spark within us, that divine within. So I want to thank all of you, Reza, Stephen, and my two lovely ladies, Susan and Carrie. Thank you for being here, for all your contributions. It was a pleasure. Just follow us. Remember to follow us. Remember to check our comments. Check all the information. We're going to put the different tools that we generated in the Center for Unity, so you can check them out. The tutor, if you want to learn about Jesus as well, we have another app called Discover Jesus that we're also going to share. So please check all this out, share, and see you next time. I'm Santiago Kneeland, and this is The Divine Within, the invisible connection with God. Take care and carpe diem.